In the glittering world of billionaires, where power is everything and trust is a forgotten currency, a single act of kindness can shatter an empire of ice. What happens when a man who controls skylines and boardrooms witnesses a humble waitress connect with his silent autistic son in a way he never could? This isn't just a story of unexpected love. It's a tale of secrets, betrayal, and the shocking truth that can either build a new family or tear them apart forever. Stay tuned to discover how a simple cup of cocoa could unravel a billion-dollar legacy. The clatter of silverware against porcelain was a symphony of irritation to Alexander Sterling. It was a sound he associated with obligatory social functions and forced smiles, both of which he was currently enduring. The restaurant Viridian Meadows was the kind of place his late wife, Eleanor, would have adored, all rustic charm and overpriced organic fare. For Alexander, it was just another gilded cage. His gaze flickered to the boy across the table. Leo, his son, his 10-year-old silent autistic son. Leo's world was a fortress, and Alexander, for all his billions, had yet to find the key. The boy's eyes, a startlingly vivid blue inherited from his mother, were fixed on the rhythmic swirling of his untouched orange juice, a small repetitive motion that was both his comfort and a stark reminder of the chasm between them. "Leo, eat your food," Alexander said, his voice a low command that usually made board members tremble. Leo didn't respond. His fingers, long and delicate, began to tap a complex, silent rhythm on the polished mahogany of the table. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. A sigh, sharp and heavy with a frustration he loathed but couldn't contain, escaped Alexander's lips. It had been 2 years since Eleanor's death, 2 years of this suffocating silence. He had thrown money at the problem, of course. The best therapists, the most exclusive schools, a full-time nanny with a PhD in child psychology. Nothing had pierced the veil. He was about to issue another futile command when a shadow fell over their table. "Is everything all right here, sir?" Alexander looked up, his expression one of barely concealed annoyance. It was a waitress. Young, probably a college student earning minimum wage. Her name tag read Amelia. She had warm hazel eyes and a smile that seemed genuine, a stark contrast to the practiced pleasantries of his own world. "Everything is fine." He clipped his tone dismissive. He wanted her gone. He wanted this whole charade of a father-son lunch to be over. But Amelia's gaze had shifted to Leo. She didn't stare at him with the pity or confusion Alexander was so accustomed to seeing in others. Instead, a soft, curious light filled her eyes. She noticed his tapping fingers. "That's a cool rhythm," she said, her voice gentle, melodic. Alexander almost scoffed. A cool rhythm. It was the symptom, a tick. Another brick in the wall of Leo's isolation. Leo's tapping faltered. His head tilted a barely perceptible movement. But for Alexander, who had spent years cataloguing every nuance of his son's behavior, it was an earthquake. Amelia, emboldened by the small reaction, leaned slightly closer, her smile widening. "It sounds like a song. Can I try?" Before Alexander could intervene, she began to tap her own fingers on the edge of the table, not mimicking Leo's rhythm, but complementing it. She created a harmony, a gentle counterpoint to his staccato beat. Leo's head lifted fully. His blue eyes, for the first time that day, focused on something other than his own private world. He looked at Amelia. He watched her fingers, then his own. And then the impossible happened. His rhythm changed, adapting to hers. A silent, percussive conversation had begun. Alexander Sterling. A man who could buy and sell companies with a single phone call, who could make or break fortunes on a whim, was utterly, completely speechless. His heart, a fortress of its own, encased in layers of grief and power, felt a tremor, a tiny, unfamiliar crack in the ice. Amelia's eyes met Alexander's over Leo's head. There was no triumph in her expression, only a shared moment of wonder. "He's a musician," she whispered, as if revealing a profound secret. And in that moment, Alexander didn't see a minimum-wage waitress. He saw a flicker of hope in the suffocating darkness of his life. He saw someone who had, in the span of 30 seconds, connected with his son in a way he hadn't managed in a decade. The fortress around Alexander's heart didn't crumble that day, but a single stubborn wildflower had just pushed its way through a crack in the stone. And he knew with a certainty that unnerved him that he had to see this waitress again. It wasn't about hope, he told himself. It was about solving a problem. Leo was a problem, and this woman, this Amelia, might just be the solution, a tool he could acquire like any other asset. He was wrong, of course. He was catastrophically, beautifully wrong. But he wouldn't realize that until much, much later. For now, he just watched his carefully constructed world tilting on its axis as a waitress, and his silent son continued their silent song. The following Tuesday, Alexander Sterling did something he hadn't done in years. He cleared his afternoon schedule. A multi-million-dollar merger with a Japanese tech firm was put on hold. A conference call with his London office was delegated to his perpetually stressed COO, a man named Marcus Thorne. All for a lunch he had no intention of eating. He sat at the same table in Viridian Meadows, the rustic decor feeling slightly less oppressive this time. He had called ahead, a move that was second nature to him, and requested Amelia as their waitress. The hostess, a willowy blonde with a practiced smile, had assured him it would be taken care of. Leo was beside him, engrossed in a new obsession, a small silver kaleidoscope Alexander had picked up on a whim from a street vendor. The shifting patterns of colored glass seemed to provide the order and predictability his son craved. When Amelia arrived, her smile was just as warm as he remembered. "Welcome back," she said, her hazel eyes twinkling as she looked at Leo. "And hello to the musician." Leo didn't look up, but a small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. It was a ghost of an expression, but for Alexander it was a sunrise. "He's been calmer since our last visit." Alexander found himself saying the admission feeling foreign on his tongue. He wasn't a man who admitted to needing help, to things being beyond his control. "Music is good for the soul," Amelia said, simply placing a glass of orange juice in front of Leo without needing to be asked. She then turned to Alexander. "The usual, Mr. Sterling." He was taken aback. "The usual. Black coffee, no sugar. And you'll stare at the menu for 10 minutes, but you'll end up ordering the grilled chicken salad with the dressing on the side," she said, a playful glint in her eye. Alexander was momentarily stunned. He was a creature of habit, a fact he used to his advantage in the boardroom. But for this waitress to have observed him so closely, to have seen past the veneer of power to the predictable man beneath, was both unnerving and strangely intriguing. "You're observant," he stated, a hint of admiration in his voice. "It's my job to be," she replied with a shrug. "But I also believe in paying attention to people. Really paying attention. You'd be surprised what you can learn." Her gaze flickered to Leo, a silent emphasis on her words. Throughout the lunch, Alexander found himself watching Amelia as much as he watched his son. He watched the way she navigated the busy restaurant, a graceful dance of efficiency and warmth. He saw her crouch down to talk to a crying toddler, at another table her voice a soothing balm. He saw her share a quick, knowing smile with the elderly man dining alone in the corner. And he saw the way she interacted with Leo. She didn't talk down to him. She didn't bombard him with questions. She simply existed in his space, a calming presence. At one point, she brought over a small bowl of sugar cubes. "For your masterpiece," she said to Leo, placing them beside his tapping fingers. Leo paused, his blue eyes studying the cubes. Then slowly, methodically, he began to arrange them, building a small, intricate structure. A tower, a fortress. Alexander felt that now familiar pang in his chest. A fortress. Just like the one around his own heart, the one around his son's mind. "Why are you so good with him?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Amelia looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I don't think I'm good with him in the way you mean. I just see him. I don't see a problem to be solved. I see a person." Her words were a direct hit, a torpedo to the hull of his carefully constructed worldview. He had always seen Leo's autism as a challenge, an obstacle to be overcome. He had never once considered simply seeing Leo. "I have a younger brother," Amelia continued, her voice softening. "His name is Daniel. He has Fragile X syndrome. It's different from autism, but there are similarities. The world can be a loud, scary place for him. I learned a long time ago that the best thing I can do is just be with him in his world, not try to drag him into mine." The revelation hung in the air between them, a fragile bridge of shared understanding. Alexander, for the first time, felt a flicker of something other than frustration, or a detached sense of duty towards his son. It was a nascent, terrifying feeling of connection. Not just to Leo, but to this woman who saw the music in his son's silence. He cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the sudden intimacy of the conversation. "I want to make you a proposition." Amelia's eyebrows shot up. "A proposition?" "I want you to be Leo's full-time caregiver, a companion, whatever you want to call it." The words came out more bluntly than he intended, a business transaction. Amelia's warm expression cooled. "Mr. Sterling, I'm not for sale." "I'm not trying to buy you," he said, frustrated by his own clumsiness. "I'll pay you 5 times what you make here. 10 times. Name your price." She shook her head, a look of disappointment in her eyes. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about money. I connect with Leo because it's genuine. You can't put a price on that. You can't hire genuine." She turned to leave, and a wave of panic, cold and sharp, washed over Alexander. He couldn't let her walk away. He was losing his only lead, his only flicker of hope. "Wait!" he called out, his voice sharp with an uncharacteristic desperation. Amelia paused, her back still to him. "Please," he said the word, feeling like a foreign object in his mouth. "Just think about it. It wouldn't be a job. It would be helping a boy who needs a friend, who needs someone who can hear his music." He had, for the first time, spoken from the heart. He had revealed a sliver of his own vulnerability. Amelia turned slowly, her hazel eyes searching his. She saw past the billionaire, past the power and the tailored suit. She saw a father lost and desperate. "I'll think about it," she said softly. "On one condition." "Anything," he said, his relief palpable. "You have to have lunch with us. Every day. And you have to put your phone away. You have to be here, really here." It was a simple request, but for a man like Alexander Sterling, it was a seismic shift. An hour of his undivided attention was a commodity more valuable than any stock in his portfolio. "Done," he said, without a moment's hesitation. As Amelia walked away, Alexander looked at his son, who was now carefully placing the final sugar cube on his creation. A perfect symmetrical tower, a silent testament to a world of order and beauty that Alexander was only just beginning to comprehend. He realized then that his proposition, his offer of money, had been a test. Not a test for Amelia, but a test for himself. And he had almost failed. He had almost treated this precious, fragile hope as just another acquisition. The path forward was uncertain. This strange, informal arrangement with a waitress was unlike anything he had ever navigated. There were no contracts, no clauses, no bottom lines. There was only a promise to be present. And for the first time in a long time, Alexander Sterling felt a flicker of something that wasn't power or control. It was a terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly unfamiliar feeling, hope. But in the shadows of his corporate empire, Marcus Thorne, his COO, was already taking notice of his boss's unusual behavior. A seed of suspicion, small and dark, had been planted. And it was about to grow. The daily lunches at Viridian Meadows became a strange new ritual in Alexander's life. He was a man who thrived on routine, but this was a disruption of a different kind. It was a recalibration of his entire existence. The first few days were excruciating. He felt a phantom limb buzz where his phone should be. The urge to check stock prices, to fire off a curt email, was a physical itch. But he honored his promise. He sat and he watched. He watched Amelia and Leo. Their bond was a thing of quiet wonder. It wasn't built on grand gestures or dramatic breakthroughs. It was built in the spaces between heartbeats. It was Amelia knowing that Leo preferred his sandwiches cut into triangles, not squares. It was Leo for the first time offering Amelia a piece of his apple, a silent act of sharing that spoke volumes. Amelia, true to her word, was thinking about his offer. She hadn't accepted, but she hadn't refused either. She was in her own quiet way, conducting her own due diligence. She was observing Alexander as much as he was observing her. One afternoon, as Leo was meticulously lining up his French fries, Amelia turned to Alexander, her expression serious. "Tell me about Eleanor." The question was a bucket of ice water. No one spoke of Eleanor. Not to him. It was an unspoken rule in his world. The past was a locked room, and he held the only key. "What's there to tell?" he said, his voice instantly cold, his defenses shooting up like the steel girders of his skyscrapers. "She was my wife. She passed away." "Leo misses her," Amelia said softly, her gaze on the boy. "He may not say it, but he feels it. The silence in your house, it's not just his. It's yours, too." "You don't know anything about my house." He snapped the words sharper than he intended. "I know that a home isn't just a collection of expensive furniture." She retorted, her voice firm, but not unkind. "It's a feeling, and right now your home feels like a museum, a memorial to a life that's over." Alexander was floored by her audacity. Who was this woman, this waitress, to psychoanalyze him, to speak of his late wife with such familiarity? He was about to unleash the full force of his icy wrath when he saw it. A single tear tracing a silent path down Leo's cheek. His son was crying, not with a tantrum, not with a loud, attention-grabbing sob, but with a profound, silent grief that mirrored Alexander's own. and he was crying because he had heard his mother's name. The anger drained out of Alexander, replaced by a wave of shame so profound it almost buckled him. Amelia was right. In his effort to protect himself from his own grief, he had created a vacuum of emotion in their home, a place where even the memory of Eleanor was forbidden. He looked at Amelia, his eyes conveying a raw, unguarded plea. "Help me." She simply nodded a silent acknowledgement of his surrender. "Tell me one thing about her," she prompted gently. "One happy memory." He swallowed the lump in his throat, feeling like a shard of glass. She loved to dance," he began, his voice thick with unshed tears. "In the kitchen while she was cooking. She would pull me in, and we would waltz between the island and the refrigerator. She always said that even billionaires needed a little bit of silly in their lives." As he spoke, he saw a flicker of a memory in Leo's eyes, a ghost of a smile. He remembered. He remembered the dancing. That afternoon, for the first time in 2 years, Alexander spoke about his wife. He told Amelia about her infectious laugh, her terrible singing voice, her passion for gardening. And with every story, he felt a weight lifting a thaw in the permafrost of his heart. He also started to learn more about Amelia. He learned that she was studying to be a special education teacher. He learned that her younger brother Daniel was the center of her universe. He learned that she was fiercely independent, stubbornly optimistic, and had a core of steel beneath her gentle exterior. He started to look forward to their lunches not just for Leo's sake, but for his own. Amelia's presence was a breath of fresh air in his sterile, predictable world. She challenged him, she provoked him, and she made him feel human. But their burgeoning connection did not go unnoticed. Marcus Thorne, Alexander's COO, was a man whose ambition was matched only by his paranoia. He had risen through the ranks of Sterling Industries by being ruthless, by anticipating his rivals' moves, by knowing where all the bodies were buried. And he saw Amelia as a threat. He launched a private investigation into her life. He dug into her finances, her family, her past. He was looking for leverage, for a weakness he could exploit. And he found it. Amelia's family was struggling. Her father had lost his job a year ago, and her mother's part-time work barely covered the bills. Daniel's medical expenses were a constant crushing weight. Amelia's meager salary from the restaurant, supplemented by her student loans, was the glue holding them together. They were one unexpected expense away from disaster. Marcus smiled, a cold, predatory gleam in his eyes. He had found his weapon. One evening, as Amelia was leaving the restaurant after a long shift, a sleek black town car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, and Marcus Thorne's face, all sharp angles and calculated charm, appeared. "Amelia," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I'm Marcus Thorne. I work with Alexander Sterling. I think it's time you and I had a chat." A sense of foreboding, cold and sharp, washed over Amelia. She had seen men like Marcus before. Men who moved with the effortless confidence of those who believed the world belonged to them. "I have nothing to say to you," she said, clutching her bag, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Oh, I think you do," Marcus said, his smile never reaching his eyes. "I think you'll want to hear what I have to say about your family, about your brother Daniel, and about a certain trust fund that could solve all of your problems." He paused, letting the words hang in the air like a baited hook. "Get in the car, Amelia. It's time you understood the rules of the game you're playing." The door of the town car swung open, an invitation into a world of shadows and secrets, a world that could save her family, but might cost her soul. With a sense of dread, knowing she had no other choice, Amelia got in the car. The game had just changed, and she was no longer just a player. She was the pawn. The leather seats of the town car felt cold against Amelia's skin, a stark contrast to the warmth she had come to associate with her time with Leo and Alexander. The interior of the car was a bubble of silence and power gliding through the city streets with an unnerving smoothness. "What do you want, Mr. Thorne?" Amelia asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He gestured to a small built-in bar, a silent offer of a drink. Amelia shook her head. He poured himself a whiskey, the amber liquid catching the city lights as they flashed past. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries, shall we?" he said, taking a slow sip. "You've inserted yourself into Alexander's life, into his son's life. I want to know why." "That's none of your business," Amelia retorted, her chin held high. Marcus chuckled a dry, humorless sound. "In my world, Ms. Collins, everything is my business, especially when it concerns the stability of a multi-billion-dollar empire. An empire, I might add, that I have dedicated my life to building alongside Alexander." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You see, Alexander is vulnerable right now. Grief has a way of clouding a man's judgment. He sees you, and he sees a solution, a quick fix for his son. But I see a complication, an unknown variable. And I don't like unknown variables. I'm not a variable," Amelia said, her voice laced with indignation. "I'm a person, and I genuinely care about Leo." "Oh, I have no doubt you do," Marcus said, his tone infuriatingly condescending. "But caring doesn't pay the bills, does it? I've taken the liberty of looking into your financial situation. It's precarious. Your father's unemployment, your mother's health issues, your brother's extensive medical needs. It's a heavy burden for a young woman to bear." Amelia felt a chill creep up her spine. He had investigated her. He had pried into the most private, painful parts of her life. The violation of it made her feel sick. "What do you want?" she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "I want you to disappear," he said bluntly. "I want you to walk away from Alexander and his son. In return, I am prepared to offer you a way out, a permanent solution to your family's financial woes." He slid a sleek, leather-bound folder across the seat. Amelia's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were documents, legal papers filled with jargon she didn't understand. But she understood the numbers. It was a trust fund, in her name. The amount was staggering. Enough to pay off her parents' mortgage, to cover Daniel's medical care for the rest of his life, to ensure she would never have to worry about money again. "Where did this come from?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Let's just say it's a gesture of goodwill," Marcus said smoothly. "A severance package, if you will, from a concerned party who wishes to remain anonymous." Amelia's mind reeled. It was blood money, a bribe to abandon a lonely man and his vulnerable son. A boy who had for the first time started to open his heart to her. "And if I refuse," she asked, her gaze meeting his in the dim light of the car. Marcus's smile vanished. His eyes turned to chips of ice. "Then things will become difficult for you and for your family. Jobs can be lost. Loans can be called in. Medical insurance can be complicated. I am a man of considerable influence, Ms. Collins. I can open doors and I can slam them shut. Permanently." The threat, veiled but unmistakable, hung in the air, thick and suffocating. He would ruin them. He would use their desperation, their love for each other as a weapon against them. Tears of rage and helplessness pricked at Amelia's eyes. She thought of her father's pride, already so battered by his job loss. She thought of her mother, working herself to exhaustion. And she thought of Daniel, her sweet, innocent brother, whose well-being was her primary concern. She looked at the folder in her hands. It was a devil's bargain. Her integrity, her burgeoning relationship with Alexander and Leo, in exchange for her family's security. "You're a monster," she whispered the words, tasting like ash in her mouth. Marcus merely shrugged a picture of indifference. "I'm a businessman, and this is the cost of doing business at this level. So what's it to be? Amelia, your noble but ultimately futile stand, or your family's future?" The car pulled to a stop in front of her modest apartment building. The contrast between the opulent vehicle and her own humble reality was a cruel joke. "I'll give you 24 hours to decide, Marcus," said his voice once again smooth and controlled. "A car will be here tomorrow evening to pick up your signed acceptance. Or not. The choice, as they say, is yours." Amelia stumbled out of the car, the folder clutched in her hand like a lead weight. She didn't watch as the town car disappeared into the night. She stood on the sidewalk, the sounds of the city fading into a dull roar in her ears. She felt trapped, cornered. The world of wealth and power, which had seemed so distant and almost fairy tale-like from the outside, had shown its ugly, predatory underbelly. She went up to her apartment, her heart a tangled mess of fear, anger, and a profound, aching sadness. She looked at the trust fund documents, the crisp paper feeling like a betrayal in her hands. She thought of Leo's smile, that rare, precious thing. She thought of the way his fingers had danced with hers on the table. She thought of Alexander, of the raw vulnerability she had seen in his eyes when he spoke of his late wife. She was falling for them, not just for the boy, but for the father too. She was falling for the broken, beautiful family they were trying to piece back together, and now she was being asked to shatter it. The next day's lunch was agony. She tried to act normal, to smile, to engage with Leo, but her heart felt like a block of ice in her chest. Alexander, perceptive as ever, noticed the change immediately. "Is everything all right, Amelia?" he asked. His blue eyes filled with a genuine concern that only made her feel guiltier. "You seem distant." "I'm just tired," she lied the word, feeling clumsy and false on her tongue. She looked at Leo, who was watching her with an unusual intensity. He seemed to sense her distress. He reached out his small hand and for the first time touched hers. It was a fleeting, feather-light touch, but it was a deliberate act of comfort. And it broke her. She excused herself, rushing to the restroom, her composure crumbling. She splashed cold water on her face, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Who was she? Was she the woman who stood by her principles, no matter the cost? Or was she the woman who would sacrifice her own happiness for the people she loved? That evening, as the sun began to set, she stood by her window, the unsigned folder on her table. The black town car was due to arrive any minute. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Alexander. "Thank you for today, for every day. You've brought light back into our lives." The words were a gut punch, a reminder of what she stood to lose, what they all stood to lose. She looked at the folder again. Marcus Thorne had made a critical miscalculation. He had assumed that her love for her family was her greatest weakness. He hadn't understood that it was also her greatest strength, and it was that strength that gave her the courage to do what she had to do next. She picked up her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. Not to Marcus, but to Alexander. "We need to talk. Not at the restaurant. Somewhere private. It's about your company. It's about a man named Marcus Thorne." She hit send, her heart pounding a frantic, terrifying rhythm against her ribs. She didn't know if she was doing the right thing. She didn't know if Alexander would even believe her. But she knew she couldn't sign that folder. She couldn't let the darkness win. A few moments later, her phone buzzed again. It was Alexander. "My penthouse, the Sterling Tower. 1 hour. Come alone." The Blacktown car pulled up outside her building, a silent, menacing presence. Amelia watched it from her window, her decision made. She turned her back on it and on the easy way out. She was walking into the lion's den, but she wasn't going in as a pawn anymore. She was going in as a queen, ready to protect her king and her prince, no matter the cost. The elevator to Alexander Sterling's penthouse was a silent, gilded cage, ascending through the clouds with dizzying speed. Amelia's reflection in the mirrored walls was a stranger, a pale, determined woman who looked nothing like the cheerful waitress who had served coffee just yesterday. The weight of the unsigned folder in her bag was a constant, heavy reminder of the stakes. The elevator doors opened directly into the apartment, and the view stole her breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panoramic vista of the city, a glittering tapestry of lights against the bruised twilight sky. The space was vast, minimalist, and achingly empty. It was less a home and more a monument to wealth and solitude. It was the museum she had described, and the thought sent a pang of sadness through her. Alexander was standing by the window, a silhouette against the city he owned. He turned as she entered his face, etched with a mixture of concern and suspicion. He was no longer the vulnerable father from the restaurant. Here in his domain, he was the billionaire, the titan of industry, his power, an almost palpable aura. "You said this was about Marcus," he said, his voice low and devoid of warmth. "No pleasantries. This was business. He came to see me." Amelia began, her voice trembling slightly despite her resolve. She pulled the folder from her bag and laid it on a glass coffee table that looked more like a sculpture. "He offered me this." Alexander's eyes narrowed. He picked up the folder, his movements precise and economical. He flipped through the documents, his expression unreadable, a mask of cold control. The silence stretched thick with tension, broken only by the distant hum of the city below. "This is a Sterling Industries corporate trust," he said. Finally, his voice a dangerous calm. "The funds are untraceable, channeled through a series of offshore accounts. It's a tool we use for discreet acquisitions. He wants me to disappear," Amelia said, her voice finding its strength. "He threatened my family. He told me that if I didn't accept this and walk away from you and Leo, he would ruin us." She expected anger. She expected him to rage against Marcus, to defend her. Instead, he looked at her, his blue eyes cold and analytical. "And why should I believe you?" The question was a slap in the face. It was so unexpected, so deeply mistrustful that it momentarily stunned her into silence. "Why? Why wouldn't you believe me?" she stammered, incredulous. "Because you are, as Marcus so rightly pointed out, an unknown variable," Alexander said, his voice sharp as broken glass. "You appear out of nowhere. You form an instant, almost magical connection with my son, something the best specialists in the world couldn't do. You slowly ingratiate yourself into my life, and now you present me with a story of corporate intrigue and blackmail, positioning yourself as the innocent victim and my most trusted employee as the villain. It's a compelling narrative. Almost too compelling. Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. He didn't believe her. He thought she was a con artist, that this was all some elaborate scheme. "You think I'm lying?" she whispered, the hurt in her voice raw and real. "You think I fabricated this, that I'm after your money?" The thought had occurred to me, he said, his gaze unwavering. "People have tried far more elaborate schemes to get a piece of the sterling fortune." Tears of frustration and betrayal welled in her eyes. "You saw me with Leo. You saw the connection. You felt it. You told me I brought light back into your lives. I saw what you wanted me to see." He countered, his voice relentless. "Feelings can be manipulated, Amelia, and I am a man who has built an empire on not letting my feelings cloud my judgment." The cruelty of his words was a physical blow. He was using their shared moments of vulnerability, the very foundation of her growing affection for him, as evidence against her. He was twisting her genuine care for his son into a weapon. "How can you be so cynical?" she cried, the tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "How can you look at your son, see how happy he is, and believe that it's all a lie? Because happiness is a luxury I can't afford to be careless with." He shot back his own control, finally cracking his voice, echoing in the cavernous room. "Especially when it comes to my son. Do you have any idea what it's like? To live in a world where everyone wants something from you, where trust is just a word people use before they betray you. I have to question everything. Everyone. It's how I've survived." The raw pain in his voice, the glimpse of the lonely, embattled man behind the billion-dollar fortress, silenced her. She saw him then, not as a cruel accuser, but as a prisoner of his own wealth. A man so used to being hunted that he saw predators in every shadow. "So what now?" she asked, her voice hollow. "Do you call security? Do you have me thrown out?" Alexander didn't answer. He walked back to the window, his back to her, his shoulders tense. The city lights blinked back at him, a cold, indifferent audience. "Marcus has been with me for 15 years, he said, his voice quieter now, almost to himself. "He was there when Eleanor got sick. He was there when she died. He held this company together when I was falling apart. He's more than an employee. He's all I have left of my old life." Amelia understood then. This wasn't just about her. It was about loyalty. It was about the terrifying possibility that the one person he had trusted implicitly could be capable of such a profound betrayal. It was easier, safer to believe that she, the stranger, was the liar. "I didn't sign the papers," she said softly, her voice cutting through his reverie. "If I was after your money, I would have taken it and run. I wouldn't be here with you telling you the truth, even when it's clear you don't believe me." He turned to look at her, a flicker of doubt in his cold eyes. "I am falling in love with your son, Alexander," she said, her voice shaking with the force of her admission. "And God help me, I think I'm falling in love with the man I see when you're with him. The father, the husband who still grieves for his wife. Not this cold, suspicious shell of a man who stands before me now." She wiped her tears, her resolve hardening. "I won't be a part of this world of suspicion and backstabbing. You can have your money and your fortress of a penthouse and your trust issues. I'm going back to my life. A life where people actually trust each other." She turned and walked towards the elevator, her heart shattered. She had laid her soul bare, and he had trampled on it. It was over. "Wait." His voice was a barely audible command. She paused, her hand hovering over the call button, her back still to him. "Don't go," he said, his voice thick with an emotion she couldn't decipher. She turned around. Alexander was holding a small silver picture frame. It was a photo of him and Eleanor, laughing their arms around each other. The woman in the photo was radiant, full of life. Eleanor. She was the one who hired Marcus. He said, his voice rough with unshed tears. She said he had hungry eyes, the eyes of a man who would do anything to get to the top. She trusted him. I trusted her judgment. He looked up from the photo, his own eyes filled with a terrible dawning realization. But she also told me something else. She told me that Marcus saw people as chess pieces, that he didn't have a heart, he had a calculator. He walked towards her, the folder still in his other hand. I wanted to believe he was loyal to me. But maybe he was only ever loyal to the power I represent. He stopped in front of her, his gaze searching hers. The cold mask was gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability that mirrored her own. "I don't know who to trust anymore, Amelia," he whispered, his voice breaking. "But I know what I see in my son's eyes when he looks at you. And that is the only thing in my life that feels real right now." Suddenly, the silence of the penthouse was shattered by the shrill ringing of Alexander's phone. He glanced at the caller ID, his face hardening. "It's Marcus," he said, his voice grim. He answered, putting the call on speaker. Marcus's voice, smooth and confident, filled the room. "Alexander, my friend, I trust our little problem has been resolved. I've been informed that our guest of honor declined her severance package. A sentimental fool, it seems." "What have you done?" Marcus Alexander asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I've done what you no longer have the stomach to do." Marcus retorted, a hint of arrogance in his tone. "I'm protecting the empire from outsiders, from emotional attachments that create liabilities. I've taken care of it, permanently." A cold dread washed over Amelia. "What does he mean, permanently?" she whispered. Just then her own phone began to ring. It was her mother, her voice hysterical, barely coherent. "Amelia, it's Daniel. There was an accident at his care facility. Someone started a fire in the electrical room. The sprinklers malfunctioned. Oh God. Amelia, he's trapped." The world tilted on its axis. Amelia's phone clattered to the floor. She looked at Alexander, her eyes wide with a terror so profound it stole her breath. On the other end of the line, Marcus chuckled a low, chilling sound. "Like I said, Alexander, problem solved. Now about that merger with the Japanese." Alexander's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. He had his answer. He had pushed away the one person who was telling him the truth. And in doing so, he had walked straight into the trap set by the man he had trusted most. And now, an innocent child's life was hanging in the balance. The game was no longer about money or power. It was about life and death. The ride to Daniel's care facility was a blur of screeching tires and flashing lights. Alexander drove with a controlled fury, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, the sleek Bugatti weaving through traffic with a reckless precision that mirrored the chaos in his mind. Amelia sat beside him, a statue of silent, frozen terror, her mind replaying her mother's hysterical words, the image of her brother trapped and afraid, a searing brand on her soul. The scent of smoke hit them before they even saw the building. The care facility, a place that had always represented safety and comfort for Daniel, was now a scene of flashing emergency lights, writhing fire hoses, and the controlled chaos of first responders. Amelia was out of the car before it had fully stopped, her legs carrying her towards the police line, a desperate cry tearing from her throat. Daniel. My brother. A stoic police officer held her back, his expression a mixture of pity and professional detachment. Ma'am, you need to stay back. It's not safe. But my brother is in there. She screamed, her voice raw with panic. He has Fragile X. He'll be so scared, he won't know what to do. Alexander was right behind her, his hand on her arm, a steadying presence in the swirling vortex of her fear. He flashed a black card at the officer, his voice a low, authoritative command that cut through the noise. Alexander Sterling. My son is a patient here as well. I want to speak to the fire chief, now. The officer's demeanor shifted instantly. The name Sterling was a key that unlocked doors even in the midst of a disaster. He spoke into his radio, and within moments a man with a soot-streaked face and a weary expression was striding towards them. Chief Williams, he said, extending a hand to Alexander. Mr. Sterling, we're doing everything we can. The fire started in a basement electrical room. We have it contained, but the smoke is heavy, and there's been a partial collapse in the West Wing. The West Wing? Amelia whispered, her heart plummeting. That's where Daniel's room is. We've evacuated most of the residents. The chief continued, his gaze softening as he looked at Amelia. But the West Wing is difficult. The sprinkler system in that section failed. We have teams going room to room, but it's slow going. Every word was a hammer blow chipping away at Amelia's hope. She thought of Marcus's chilling words. Permanently. This wasn't an accident. It was an act of calculated evil. A fire in an electrical room, a malfunctioning sprinkler system. It was too precise, too convenient. Marcus hadn't just intended to scare her. He had intended to eliminate the problem at its source, to take away the person who was her greatest vulnerability, her greatest love. Rage pure and undiluted surged through Alexander. The betrayal he had felt in the penthouse was nothing compared to this. Marcus had crossed a line. He had targeted an innocent child to further his own twisted agenda. He had weaponized a boy's life. The sprinkler system. Alexander said, his voice dangerously calm. Was it tampered with? Chief Williams hesitated, his professional caution warring with the obvious suspicion in his eyes. The investigation is ongoing, but it's highly irregular for a system like this to fail so completely. It was inspected just last month. That was all the confirmation Alexander needed. He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. He wasn't calling the police. He was calling a different kind of army. His own. A team of private investigators and security specialists, men and women, who operated in the gray areas of the law, who were loyal only to him and his checkbook. I want everything on Marcus Thorne, he snarled into the phone. Financials, communications, his location. I want to know what he had for breakfast, and I want the schematics for this building. Every blueprint, every maintenance record. Now. He hung up his focus absolute. He was no longer just a grieving father or a conflicted billionaire. He was a force of nature, a man with limitless resources and a singular burning purpose to make Marcus pay. But first there was Daniel. He turned to the fire chief. "I'm going in." "Sir, I can't allow that," the chief said, his voice firm. "It's too dangerous. That building is called the Eleanor Sterling Memorial Wing." Alexander said, his voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. "My late wife personally funded its construction. I know the layout better than any of your men. I know about the reinforced maintenance tunnels that run beneath the floor. Tunnels that should be clear of smoke. Tunnels that lead directly to the West Wing." The chief stared at him, stunned. Amelia looked at him, a flicker of disbelief in her eyes. How could he know that Eleanor? She was obsessed with safety protocols. Alexander explained, his gaze finding Amelia's, a silent apology in his eyes for his earlier mistrust. After a fire at her childhood friend's school, she insisted on redundancies, fail-safes that weren't in the original plans. I thought she was being paranoid, but she always saw things other people missed. It was a ghost's gift, a lifeline from the woman whose memory Marcus had so callously defiled. "Give me a respirator and a radio," Alexander said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I can get to that wing faster than your team. Tell me the room number." Amelia grabbed his arm. Her fear for Daniel now mixed with a new terror. "Alexander, no, you can't. It's too dangerous." He looked at her, his face grim but resolute. "I have to," he said, his voice softer now. "This is my fault. I let Marcus into our lives. I trusted him. I doubted you. I have to make this right." He was not just rescuing Daniel. He was redeeming himself. Before the chief could protest further, one of his firefighters ran up his face, pale beneath the soot. "Chief, we found the boy, Daniel. He's not in his room. One of the nurses said he sometimes hides in the sensory room at the end of the hall when he's scared. But that section of the roof is unstable. We can't get to it. The sensory room, a place designed to be a sanctuary, now a potential tomb." Alexander didn't hesitate. He grabbed a respirator and a flashlight from a nearby truck. He looked at Amelia one last time, his eyes conveying a promise. "I will bring him back." And then he was gone, disappearing into the smoke-filled building like a phantom, guided by the ghost of his wife and a desperate need for redemption. Amelia could only watch, her hands clasped to her mouth, her heart a frantic prayer. She was caught in a nightmare woven from the threads of greed and power. She had stumbled into a world where billionaires played God, and the price of their games was paid in innocent lives. Inside the building, the air was thick and acrid. Alexander moved with a purpose born of adrenaline and an intimate knowledge of the building's secrets. He found the entrance to the maintenance tunnel, a small, unobtrusive panel in a janitor's closet, just where Eleanor had insisted it be. The tunnel was narrow, dark, and blessedly free of smoke. He ran his footsteps, echoing in the confined space, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the oppressive darkness. He could hear the groan of stressed metal above him, the distant roar of the fire, a constant menacing reminder of the danger. He found the access ladder that led up to the West Wing, emerging into a hallway thick with a grey choking haze. The air was hot, the silence eerie. He was in the heart of the beast. He made his way towards the end of the hall, his eyes stinging, his lungs burning with every breath, even with the respirator. He found the sensory room. The door was closed. "Daniel!" He shouted, his voice muffled by the mask. "Daniel, my name is Alexander. I'm a friend of Amelia's." There was no response. He tried the handle. Locked. He threw his shoulder against the door once, twice. It didn't budge. It was reinforced, designed to keep the children safe. Another of Eleanor's protocols now working against him. He could hear a creaking sound from above, a shower of dust raining down from the ceiling. The roof was giving way. There was no more time. He saw a fire extinguisher on the wall. He grabbed it, and with a surge of desperate strength he began to hammer it against the lock. The clang of metal against metal, a frantic, desperate drumbeat against the roar of the fire. The lock finally splintered. The door swung open, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The room was filled with soft mats, gentle lights and calming textures, and in the corner, huddled under a weighted blanket, was a small, trembling figure. It was Daniel. But he wasn't alone. Standing over him, his face illuminated by the eerie glow of the emergency lights, was Leo. His son. His silent, autistic son, who was supposed to be safe at home with his nanny. Leo had a small, determined look on his face. He had one arm wrapped protectively around Daniel's shoulders. In his other hand, he held his silver kaleidoscope. He was holding it up to Daniel's eye, showing him the beautiful, shifting patterns, creating a small, ordered world of color and light in the midst of the chaos. He was comforting him. He was protecting him. Alexander stared, his mind struggling to comprehend the scene. How had Leo gotten here? How had he found Daniel? And then he knew. Leo hadn't spoken a word in 2 years. But he had been listening. He had been watching. He had understood everything. He had understood the fear in Amelia's voice. He had understood the danger, and he had acted. In that moment, Alexander Sterling didn't see a boy with a disability. He saw a hero. He saw his son. Leo, he breathed, his voice choked with a love so fierce, so overwhelming, it brought him to his knees. Leo looked up, his vivid blue eyes meeting his father's, and for the first time in 2 long, silent years, he spoke. His voice was quiet, raspy, from disuse. But it was the most beautiful sound Alexander had ever heard. "I helped," he said. In the end, it wasn't the billions, the power, or the empire that defined Alexander Sterling's life. It was a single whispered word from his son in a smoke-filled room. Leo's quiet heroism. Amelia's unwavering integrity, and a love born in the most unexpected of places, rebuilt their shattered world. Marcus Thorne, exposed and defeated, faced the cold justice of the law, a stark reminder that true power lies not in manipulation, but in connection. This story is a testament to the fact that even in the darkest of times, the human heart has an infinite capacity for love, courage, and redemption. It reminds us that the most profound connections are often found in silence, and that true wealth is measured not in dollars, but in the family we choose and the love we fight to protect. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of the power of hope, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will make you believe in the extraordinary power of the human spirit. Click that notification bell so you never miss a story. Thank you for watching.